Boom! We are live and in full effects. It's your boy KJ Bradley and the world's greatest chaplain, Mr. Lance O'Neill. We are back with two POGS Say the World. Welcome, welcome, welcome. I know you guys missed us last week, but my favorite chaplain got taken out with a surgery. Had to get some arm work done. How you feeling, Chappie?
It feels good. I can actually move. That's about my range of motion right now, though. Seriously, legitimately, I did that last night. I got to hear. I was like, oh, I guess physical therapy is really going to hurt. Yeah, it wasn't too bad. It was arthroscopic, and now I have what's called a Popeye bicep. So when you go like this and you have normal bicep, it's now a little lump. It's like, oh cool. Okay. Because they moved the tendon from up here to down here, and then they shaved off a little bit. So nice and bruised along here. But for a weekend, after what everybody else said about shoulder surgery, I am not complaining one bit.
Really? Yeah, I thought you were gonna be down for a while, man.
Yeah, I'm out for 30 days, so I get my con leave. So I'm still within regulation of.
You get to grow a nice little leave beard and get all nice.
Yeah, and then so I still, my soldiers still calling me here and there, which is good, or texting me. I got to go into a graduation. I have a couple of my soldiers like, Chaplain, what are you going to do if you're not at our graduation next week? I'm like, settle down.
Yeah. Are you going to rock the sleeve, or are you going to try to let it hang?
I wear the sling when I go outside still, but like right now, like just kind of, as long as I'm not moving around too much, I sleep on a pillow, and I have a ice compression thing, shoulder compression thing that they gave me for like 2 months. I'm like, I've used it all the way until 2 days ago. I haven't taken the Oxy. I took Oxy for 4 days. This is hey, if something happens, do not give them any more barbiturates or whatever it is. What's the word?
I don't know. I don't
know. Morphine based.
Yeah, don't give you none of the good stuff anymore.
Yeah,
I was going to ask.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, when I had my hips done, they put me on perks, man, and I couldn't take them. Yeah. They were just too rough. They were just too rough for me, man. I couldn't take them at all. So I toughed it out with just regular 800 ibuprofen, man, and some ice packs. Yeah. I had a really cool ice machine though, wrapped around both my hips and like froze everything. I was chill.
That's kind of what the shoulder thing was. But I did the oxycodone for about 3-4 days, and then it was like I didn't feel a lot different, and then I stopped using it. Just switched over to and I was supplementing, of course, with the acetaminophen and all that.
Yeah.
But and what's really weird is it's basically like right now it's like the same pain level as it was before the surgery.
Oh wow,
so that's awesome. Yeah, and so but some of the weird stuff is like because I can't move my arm as well, my armpit is nice and raw. I know everybody wants to hear that, but it's like because the skin just kind of rubs up and you can't really dry your armpit at all. Yeah. Even with I'm telling you, antiperspirant. It's a lie. It's not a smelly perspirant is what it really is called. That's why it's probably called deodorant. I don't know. Maybe that's why it's really called that. But so we are going to talk about race today, right?
Yes. Yo. All right. So here we go.
Before we start, here's what I want. Ground rules, right? Couple ground rules. One, I want to make sure we both understand that I represent every white person that speaks in America. I am the official spokesman for all of white America. You are the official spokesman for all Black America. Let's just get that clear, because obviously we have the power to speak for everybody.
I went to the Black delegation last week to get the authorization, so I am.
Well, I have my white privilege card. So, so here's the real question: Do you want to take the Mexicans and I'll take the Chinese, since apparently there's lots of Chinese who are now white supremacists or Asian Americans. And I did live in Taiwan, so I do speak Chinese still, some.
It's weird, man. Yeah. Oh, so we're going to get into all of that. Yep. You got it. All right. Wait. Before we get into all of that, you guys, yep. All right. I am repping the A hat. My Braves have clinched their 6th straight division title. And my best friend's wearing that hideous jersey of those Doyers.
The Doyers. Los Angeles Doyers. Tell me when they did the city uniforms, why they put Los Dodgers.
Which is crazy, right?
Why wouldn't you put Los Doyers? Everybody knows what that is. Like, it's so stupid. And then it's like, oh, hey, I have an idea. Let's put them in jammies. Some Nike rep was just like, You know, I've been working on too many of these Oregon uniforms. Just make the Dodger ones blue. Put Lost Dodgers. Just I don't have time to deal with this baseball team crap. I'm working on Oregon's 9,342nd combination here. That's where we get paid. Did you see they shut down the Nike store in Portland?
No, why?
Theft.
Oh, geez.
I think it was Portland, yeah.
Is it some of that where they breaking in? They're doing the mass break-ins.
Yeah, I think so. I didn't read the whole thing, but I just kind of laughed. It's like the hometown of Nike has to shut down the store because of the policies of the city and the county and the state. And then you wonder why Idaho wants to expand and all these rural areas want to go to greater Idaho.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
I don't know, man. I guess it's a sign of the times. All right, yo, let's get into it. So we got race relations. A couple of things we're gonna talk about. We're gonna talk about the issue of reparations, which I think is gonna be a very interesting conversation. And then we'll just we'll start there and then we'll flow from there if that's okay.
I'm fine with that. I will warn you right now, though. I did not know this is what we were talking about.
Yeah, this is completely off the cuff.
But I come preloaded when it comes with arguments about reparations.
This is completely off the cuff, so I'm excited to hear what you got to say about it. I have some interesting perspectives.
Hey, this one's your start. You're the oppressed on this one. I think you get the chance to call whether you want to go first or not.
On behalf of the Black delegation. So
the House calls on the Honorable Mr. Bradley.
All right, so first and foremost, I've given it a lot of thought. I sat back and I kind of weighed the pros and cons of reparations and kind of walked the dog on it a little bit. And this is what I concluded. And, you know, since I got the power to speak on the Black race, this is what we're going to go with. Monetary reparations is not feasible. There's just no way in hell you can quantify it with a dollar sign, but then you have to go back and you have to say, okay, who gets it and who doesn't get it, right? And then that opens up a lot of can of worms. So if you were to proceed with this reparations, right? Let's say Congress or the president says, you know what?
Or we can't. State of California.
What a state order. Crazy. How you broke and you still trying to get, man, don't get me started. All right. So,
well, that's what we're talking about, though. Get you started.
Yeah,
we're literally talking about
California is a whole different California. That's why people are leaving in droves, man. Those dudes, how are you so much in debt, man? And then talking about, hey, you know what? Don't worry about it. We're just gonna cut this check.
Oh, we could have an entire cast just about.
That's what I'm saying, and on California alone. But all right, so the point and the premise. Here we go. So here's the thing with reparations, right? If you're gonna say, okay, hey, we want to do something. We can't do the cash issue because there's just no way for us to go back and verify this. Too much red tape. This is what, these are a couple options that I think is feasible. If you were to take, anyone who identifies it obviously it'll be exactly like the PPP loan. And, there's going to be scammers and bootleggers and everybody skipping through the cracks, no matter what you pick. So it just is what it is. I think the best way to do that would be to open up tax incentives, some sort of tax incentives, or some sort of education incentives. Now, what that does is that gives you two options, right? Since community colleges are generally free anyway, you can open up and say anybody who, qualifies as African American, and I don't know how you would test it. I haven't thought it through, but anybody who qualifies as African American is eligible for up to 2 years of free college, right? And what that does is says, okay, cool. You can take a trade. We'll pay for your certifications if you decide to take a trade. All of it's encompassed. Everything's all cost covered, right? So you have to obviously apply, get approved, yada yada, go through the government red tape. And what that does is that gives you 2 years of free college or a trade of your choice to get you started on the career path you want, right? So what that does is that doesn't burden the taxpayer to say, okay, hey, taxpayers aren't having to pay the burden. In a sense, I guess you can kind of, I don't know. The issue you run into is how do you pay for something like that, right?
So let me ask you a question.
Yep.
To start on that, why should any one group be given 2 years of free additional education? Why not at that point just extend public education from year 12 to year 14 for anybody who wants it, especially in the trades?
So that's a great question, and I knew you were gonna come with that. So here's the thing, right? So we've had a president. We've had in the United States, there's been a reparations president set, right?
Who?
The Japanese got reparations from World War II, right?
From Eisenhower.
Yep. The Chinese got reparations from the railroad camps. Yep. Native Americans also received reparations. So did the Irish in 1923, I want to say. And then America after World War II.
You're gonna have to educate me on those ones. I'm go ahead. Give me some history.
Yep. And then
lay it on me.
Yep. So all right. So the Chinese, when the Chinese I guess they petitioned Congress. I can't remember exactly. Yeah, I should have brought my notepad. But the Chinese petitioned Congress, and they gave them a reparations package, which incentivized them. It was a small business tax incentive, right? So the way they were able to open up all their businesses in black neighborhoods is they said, okay, hey, you can't open up past the red line in the white districts. But what we will do for you is we will, if you decide to open a business in any of the minority or less affluent neighborhoods, you're not going to pay any business taxes for 10 years. So that incentivized a lot of, and that opened up a lot of avenues for the Chinese to.
What year was this passed?
I would have to go to Professor real quick. We're talking 40s, 50s ish. Right as we were getting ready to start the Industrial Revolution. I don't know if it was Ike or the guy before him.
Okay. The Japanese one I'm aware of, but I have a very specific argument about the Japanese one.
Yep. So Japanese guys, so they were able to attend college for free, right? So I don't think it's out. I wouldn't necessarily say it's out of the realm of possibility for the United States to do it, because we have, in a sense, presidents, and then we can see how that affected the social economic classes of those ethnic groups, right? Obviously, the Japanese were able to take that and advance their societal status within a generation. Same with the Chinese. Once they were given those business and land grants, they were able to establish a foothold that still dominate the African American communities today. So, and then you look at the economics of it all circulating. Let me see. Let me see.
Okay, while you're doing that, I want to hit something on Quora.
Go ahead. No, you're good.
Now, obviously, this is just some dude posting this, okay? So take it for what it's worth. But this is, Quora, you can go and ask questions about reparations, all that. It says the survivors still living from the Japanese internment, President Reagan gave $20,000 each. The families of people who had passed away already did not get anything. The Chinese Americans who actually have railroad builder ancestors would be hard to find. Most of their guys who survived went back home, or their heirs got no railroad reparations. Native Americans, the government essentially pays the tribal reservations the equivalent of welfare in a lump sum, where those in charge take the bigger share, and the idea of welfare system actually creates a borderless reservation without American populace. It's a system of hopelessness. Blah, blah, blah. Also, will prior action serve as precedent for slave trade reparations? No, because prior action involved in the actual survivors themselves. As we know, there are no evil slavers from back then still alive. Booker T. Washington said this. There is a class of colored people who make it a business of keeping the troubles, the wrongs, and the hardships of the Negro race before the public. Having learned that they are able to make a living out of their troubles, they have grown into the settled habit of advertising their wrongs, partly because they want sympathy and partly because it pays. Some of these people do not want the Negro to lose his grievances because they do not want to lose their jobs. There's a certain class of race problem solvers who don't want the patient to get well because as long as the disease holds out, they have not only an easy means of making a living, but also an easy medium through which to make themselves prominent before the public. And I think we both know that quote from Booker T. Washington.
Yep.
But so I don't, if this is accurate, then there were no reparations to the Chinese Americans. Native Americans, yes, they've been given, welfare and things, some of those.
No reparations in terms of cash payout, but I'm saying in the idea of reparations, allowing them to be able to have those tax-free incentives to open businesses. Okay. It wasn't officially reparations.
So it wasn't called reparations. Okay.
Right. Yeah, it wasn't. There was no official law or anything writing them reparations. But
and my argument. My argument towards the Japanese one is it was directly to the people that were interned, and that's it.
Right, and that's the thing. Yeah, and that's why I say you can't quantify it now with Black Americans because shit, man, we're all mixed up.
So I think I'll agree with you. I think I agree with you that reparations based on historical actions, especially when you talk about further back, the further back you go, the less, not only are we able to, but should we pay reparations?
Right.
Because I think if you start to go back, and this is an argument that I think lots of people make, is that you go back far enough, everybody's been oppressed.
Yep.
We've talked about this. The word slave comes from Slavs, who were the most traded slaves in the world by the Arab nations, the Arab caliphate that stretched from Spain to India, and the Slavs very well. Like the greatest slaves were the blue-eyed, blonde-haired ones that they went and got from the Caucasus. It's almost like words have meaning. And so these the women would be taken and used as sex slaves, and the men would be castrated and used as normal eunuch slaves.
Yep.
And so, I look back and I go, I'm LDS, I'm Mormon, right? And so in 1840s, somewhere right around there, the Mormons were gathering in Missouri, and they were making the stink and getting bigger. And Missourians, this is the frontier back then. These hard living people on out there on the borders of America didn't want these clean cut northern people coming down saying, this is our land. We've been promised this land by God. Yep. Right. And so they were pushed back and raiding. And not only that, the Mormons in the numbers that were drawing from, not just from the North, but now from immigration, because at that point it was starting to really, the missionary work was really starting to go. So in Independence, Missouri, ironically named, there was a executive order written by Governor Boggs of Missouri that after a certain date, that it would be legal to kill any Mormons that were still in the state.
Right.
So the Mormon LDS leaders, they went to federal government like, dude, what the freak? They're saying they're going to kill us just because of our faith. Isn't this like something that, I don't know, should be frowned upon by the federal government because of the Constitution? And the dude basically went, well, there's an election. I don't want to lose the South. Sorry.
Yep.
You boil it down, that's what it was. So the Mormons they were forcibly removed to Missouri, ended up in Illinois, built up Nauvoo into the second largest city in Illinois before Chicago, and then the whole thing with Joseph Smith being assassinated and all that, and then moving west. So my point is, you could go back and somewhere in your lineage, KJ Bradley, you could find somebody, even if your ancestry went through Haiti or Jamaica, back to the Congo, to Ethiopia, or to I don't know, Botswana, down to wherever. Whatever path your line, and here's the other part. What line are we talking? You go back far enough, I'm guessing you have a Scottish grandmother or Scottish grandfather, right?
Funny you mentioned that. Yeah,
so, I know. It's like I know you.
Yeah, paternally, we were from South Scotland, so we were Africans in Scotland that just kind of hung out and decided to come over to America in like the 1700s. I don't know why, but that was a bad idea.
So here's the thing: you probably have some literal Scottish blood in you. There's probably some, right? Okay. So at some point, do you go, well, I deserve reparations because Scotland was oppressed by the King of England for
Technically,
400
that's
years.
still oppressed, so I'm double oppressed.
Right, but you see what I'm saying? Like you go back far enough, and you go back far enough. Trump probably has a reason to say my ancestors were oppressed because my real name was Drumpf, Drumph, and it was so bad that we got picked on. We got picked on. It was horrible. It was huge. They made my grandfather leave. It was huge. I can't do a Trump, by the way. I can do a Clinton. I can do a heck of a Clinton, but I can't do it. I never really got Trump down. But you go back far enough, and I think that's where you and I agree that reparations is a non-starter monetarily.
Monetarily, yeah. Hold on, before you go in.
Yeah.
So one of the users said that the word slave was traded by the government for the word civilian and has another class living outside the system that doesn't follow the same rules. And then
say that again. Read that again, please.
The word slave was traded by the government for the word civilian and has another class living outside the system that doesn't follow the same rules. And then they just said, no, they were forced bred. Scottish and Irish were considered cheap slaves, and they were hybrid. They were trying to hybrid value and cost. So they're talking about in regards to, I think they were talking about in regards to the Scottish. So yes, for the most part.
Hey, by the way, thanks for whoever put that comment. That's great.
Yeah, I can't see the names on it. It just says Facebook users. So thank you guys for the comments. So in regards to, we do know that when America was a colony and when it was getting established, we just read that book too, by the way, that they were sending people over here because it was,
they were the shit. They were
literally.
What was the word? That was such a good word. The offscourings. Isn't that what it was?
Yeah, the offscouring.
Great word. That's what shit used to be called, was offscouring. When he said that, I love that word. They were the offscouring of society.
So then it says, "It's my boy Tree. What's happening, Pam? What's happening, fam?" So yeah, so we do know that, you know what I'm saying, and initially it wasn't an African American exclusive thing for slaves in America, right? Initially, when in the 1700s, before we got independence, they had white slaves working out in the fields with the black slave, like the Scots, the Irish, all those dudes would come over and they would work off their debt. But what happened is, for whatever reason, they were able to, after a generation, they were able to obtain their, citizenship, right?
That's what used to traditionally be the case with most slavery. Basically, after the Israelites left Egypt, slavery generally became hey, you owe me this amount of labor, and once you've paid off your, whether it's Roman, whatever, once you've paid off the labor, it's done. And in the American culture, it became, you are born into slavery, therefore you are a slave. So it is absolutely acceptable, in my opinion, to say, and I know, shocking, that slavery in America was actually race-based. Yeah, I know that's hard to imagine. Lots of people in America won't say that, though. I do think there's an idea that they won't say that.
I will tell you, it was race-based, but it was also economically driven. And here's why. Here's why I say that. So the guys, the slaves that came from Africa were Africa, right? They got
a little about that, right? Yeah,
Africans. So they were agriculturists, right? They knew how to plant the rice. They knew how to plant the tobacco. So when they came here, the Irish, they know how to plant potatoes and stuff like that.
Potatoes.
Yeah. Wasn't really a big seller in the South, right? But once the rice plantation, indentured servitude, again, slowly changed the definition. Absolutely right. So once those African slavers got into that Charleston port and they saw those rice plantations start taking off and they started seeing the tobacco start taking off, then the guys was like, it became an economic necessity to say, okay, hey, we appreciate the white slaves. They're cool, but I can make more money with these African slaves because they bring me more value with their knowledge.
Well, I don't know if that's it could have been, and I'm not saying that's not the case. It's definitely possible. I think it's because there was this, at the time, there was the accepted racial bigotry of separation of whites and blacks.
Yep.
And because even though you're Irish or you're Scottish or you're poor or you're whatever, as white, you still look like you're white.
Yep.
And as you're black, you still look like you're black. Therefore, because as a white person, I am better than you, I feel a little bit more better in my Christianity about holding you down and keeping you in the fields and your kids in the fields, because the Lord said that the Bible, there are, well, I shouldn't do a Southern one on that one because it was probably a little bit, Presbyterian, but they're slaves in the Bible. And even Paul said that the slaves should follow their servants. That's what Paul said. So, you're a slave. You better be doing what the master says. And that's us. So, but it's interesting. I do think it was very, very much based in a racial change of the idea that blacks and whites were so different back then. I think there was the mentality of not separate but equal, but two legitimate. When we talk about race and we talk about ethnicity and those things, now we look at things and say, okay, look, essentially the only difference between me and you is you've got more melanin in your skin, and you root for the Braves and I'm a white guy who roots for the Dodgers. Shocking. It's like, hey, what are you, a Celtics fan too? No, I'm a Jazz fan. Oh, that's even worse. Oh, who was Jazz? But back then, I really do. I think there was absolutely the perception of, you may be white, you may be poor, you may be white trash, but you are still above the blacks.
Absolutely.
And you are still above the easily seen differences. And because of that, it was a lot easier for the whites to, ironic, and I don't think this was on purpose, but it reinforced that racism that we deal with throughout history of America, because now it's so much harder to say, well, you're Irish and you're a piece of shit, but it's a lot easier to say you're Irish, you're a piece of shit, but the Africans are the dung beetle that's underneath living off the shit.
Yeah.
So they're even lower than you are. Yeah. And if you don't have that, because look, go back to Africa. You had tribes that thought other tribes were literal monkeys. You thought that they had tribes that were like that, and that's, or Hotel Rwanda. What did they call the Tutsis? Were cockroaches, right?
Yeah,
that's what they called them, were cockroaches. So, and that's because they have. And I've always wondered with some of those things, like if you're living in Rwanda, and I get it in terms of you're true to who you are and all that, but even like the caste system in India and some of those things, I look at it and go, how do you know just by looking at somebody if they're a Tutsi or I'm trying to remember the Swahili? They weren't Swahili, were they?
No, you're talking about how to
Hotel Rwanda. Remember when they
distinguish which tribe or which,
right? But how do you know what tribe? You can't just look at somebody. You look at me and you can't say, "Oh, well, you're clearly Irish." Cork
no,
County.
So from the outside looking in, you wouldn't be able to know. But it's the same way. It's the same way a foreigner will look at us and not be able to know whether we're from the Northeast or we're from the South or.
But
so
see,
it would have to be. No, I'm saying it would have to be those cultural nuances that give off those telltale signs. You know what I mean?
Okay, so here's my question though. You go up to New York.
Yep.
And they say, hey, New York has just passed a law that if you are not from New York, you will lose a pinky toe. Wouldn't you begin to very quickly speak much more clearly so that I am from upstate New York?
Yep.
Or me coming to the South, they're like, hey, if you're white and you're in the South, if you're not from here, you have to pay a 15% service tax in Georgia. You don't think I'm going to start talking like this the rest of the time I'm down here?
Absolutely.
I know how to. Are you shitting me? That's ain't nothing. So it's weird to me that the tribal stuff, because you look at the African American community, I can't look at you again and say you're Ethiopian or whatever the background is, because even in different parts of Africa, you do have some lighter skin, most darker, obviously, in Africa, but there are some different places where you get some of those different mixtures. And that's kind of where my question is, like, how do you tell the difference? And it kind of goes into the American thing right now. What we started with, how do I know that KJ Bradley deserves reparations for being a ancestor of a slave versus KJ Bradley not deserving because his ancestors came through Scotland, right, and directly after, and let's say that's one line. Let's say the second line of your ancestors came in 1890 when there was when there were no slave laws. How do you
see? And that's the golden question. That's the golden question that needs to be answered, right? So you say, okay, well, fine. Everybody from Africa, or everybody, say we do a national DNA registry, right?
Oh, I'm anti-reparations, period. For
yeah,
the record.
yeah. So that's why I knew this was going to be a good conversation.
Yeah.
So I think it's a lot harder to sit back and say, okay, if you're Black, we're going to give you money, right? You just can't. You can't. That, I mean, the idea sounds great. You just can't. And then
or Black enough.
Yeah, like where's the line? You know what I'm saying? It's just too, you can't quantify it. And that's my biggest concern.
And that's the irony of this entire thing, right?
Yeah.
Because back when slavery in the 1800s, how much blood do you need to qualify as a Black person?
Exactly, right?
One drop. And now you're saying, well, hey, I need reparations because if I have even one drop of Black blood, I get reparations too.
Yep.
You go back far enough, I've got Black blood.
I'm sure everybody.
Indiana. Yeah. I mean, you go back far enough, I've done the DNA test. Yeah. I'm almost exclusively European. Shocking. But but you go back far enough, and how do you tell? And do you, okay, tell me why, since we've talked about this, I want you to tell me why I'm against reparations in general. I want to make sure you understand where I'm coming from. What's your understanding of why I'm against reparations in general?
Let's see. If I remember correctly, it is, I think you are staunchly against the idea of having people who had nothing to do with it pay for something they have nothing to do with it, and then add in the other factors that we talked about. Well, where do you draw the line at? How do you add in all those factors, and it just doesn't make fiscal sense, and it doesn't make operational sense. There's no way to enforce it or code it.
There's another part of this, and those are two very big parts of it. Yes, because there's not a slave alive today.
Yeah, absolutely.
Not what we're talking.
Right? Absolutely.
Okay, but the ability to go back and do it. But the other part of this is, what is the definition of racism? Definition of racism is essentially treating somebody a specific way based on the color of their skin, correct?
Yes.
So if you say we are going to set up a law, set up a reimbursement camp, whether we're going to set something up where you get the benefits of something based solely on the color of your skin, how is that not the definition of racism?
Isn't that the argument that SCOTUS is having? Clarence? I think that was Clarence had.
It's reverse racism. Okay, yeah. So this is something that came up with me a long, long time ago. I was in high school, and I have a couple stories here. But so my best friend was from LA. He was from South Central, Eric Wright, and love the guy, great kid. And he was from Compton, so his dad brought him up when he was in about eighth grade, I think, to Salt Lake to get away from the gangs and all that. This was about 1988, 87, 88. Eric Wright. Oh yeah, Easy, absolutely. Oh yeah. So Eric introduced me to all that stuff, NWA, all that stuff. Ice Cube's America's Most Wanted, Little Boys and Girls. I'll stop right there before I embarrass myself too much. I was listening to NWA half an hour ago. No kidding. Yep. So, I listened to I Wish I Was a Little Bit Taller, and then the next song went into a Dre song, and I was like, no, and I went into NWA, played one song. My daughter's like, I didn't know you like this. I'm like, this is old school. This is, yeah. So Eric introduced me to those things, right? And he came up. And so I was in a senior English class, and I wrote this article. I wrote a paper about reverse racism, how because Eric was one of the very, very few African Americans in Salt Lake City. Now, when I grew up in Salt Lake, I believe the African American community was the fourth or fifth largest. I mean, so you went whites, which is like 95%. You had some Polynesians, which were like 94%, or I'm sorry, like 4%. Mexicans who were like 1%. Blacks were like actually, I think we had more. I think we had more Indians than blacks. Yep. Okay, so very, very white community, not a lot of black kids. Yeah. Well, because of that, Eric got more dates and got away with more crap than you could ever imagine. I mean, just stuff that I was like, if I did that, are you kidding? Like, I'd get kicked out of school. I'd this, I'd that. So I wrote this paper about this reverse racism, and the teacher, she's like, I've never even thought about this. Does he really get treated differently because he's black? I'm like, oh yeah. And she's like, for the better? I'm like, oh yeah.
That's the first actually working right there, baby.
Oh, and he knew it too. I got a call from a girl one time. He'd broken his hand. If you've ever seen somebody with a cast that has these two locked in, these two free, and this thumb, so you can go like this and that's it. You're right. It's because you punch a wall and it breaks one of these two bones. And so he punched a wall. I get this call from her. I knew what happened. I knew he was playing basketball and he missed a shot, went over, punched the wall, broke his hand. I knew what happened. This girl calls me. She's like, hey, Lance, I just want to check with you. Eric told me that he got shot. I'm like, yeah, and? Well, is that really what happened? That's what happened to his hand? I'm like, yep. Of course, this is my best friend. You think I'm going to tell her the truth? Tell her he's lying? You think about that for a second, though. If I went to somebody and said I got shot, they'd just like, shut up. You're so full of shit. But Eric's like, yep, I got shot. Yep. How much sympathy you think he got from that girl? Oh, yeah. White girl. I'm telling you, all the girls he was dating there were white girls, too. Okay. Because especially in Utah and Salt Lake, there was this kind of, I don't know if it was necessarily I want to mess with my parents type thing, but it was more like, oh, here's an exotic guy.
It's different. Yeah, it's something different.
Yeah, different. Exactly. And don't get me wrong. Eric would have pulled if he was a white guy. Eric was a good looking kid, funny. Again, my best friend in high school. So I have two questions about that as far as the racism goes. So you could say Eric got benefits because he was black, right? Which would be a reverse racism, but it's still based in racism. Okay, so here's my question. Was it not racist then for Douglas, Eric's dad, to move from Southern California to Salt Lake because he knew that's where all the white people were and it was safer? Is that not racist, moving out of one space to another because racially based, he knew the violence was less and the chances of him running into NWA police LA stuff in the late 80s, early 90s was probably not going to happen in Salt Lake.
Not in Salt Lake. I don't think so in Salt Lake.
So that's part one of my racism question. Keep that one in mind. Here's the second part of my racism question. A few years later, I go on my mission to Taiwan. I come back. By then, Eric moved back to South Central. Call him up. Hey, buddy, I'm going to be in California on these dates. I want to come see you. He's like, what are you talking about? I was like, no, I want to come see you. I know you're living in Compton. I just want to come over and say hi. He's like, dude, you can't do that. And I'm like, what are you talking about? I just want to come hang out. He's like, you want to come to Compton? It's like, well, yeah, I'll just come see where you're at. He's like, you ain't coming to Compton, man. You're crazy. You are not coming. You won't even make it. You won't make it to my house before you get carnapped, beaten up, whatever. You are not. You are crazy. I was like, dude, are you serious? I'm just like, it's LA. What's the difference? He's like, no, man. No. You ain't coming, man. Nope. I ain't doing that. No, I ain't doing that to you, man. I was like, oh, well, I appreciate it. So I lost contact with him for 20 years because of that. But isn't so okay. So now you have a black man who moves his family to a white neighborhood specifically to get away from some of the racial issues and challenges, but he went specifically to a white area because of this. Racist? I don't know. I think it's based in race. I don't think it's necessarily, I think it's a recognition of race. And me not being able to go into Compton because I'm white, I think that's absolutely racist.
All right. So there are a lot of layers to peel on that onion.
Sure.
So Compton. Let's start with that one and work my way back.
Let's talk about Compton. Yeah, Compton.
So Compton in the 90s, I'm sure he told you can't come out of love. It's not that you couldn't.
Oh, he did. Absolutely.
It's not that you couldn't come. You could have came. You had freedom of maneuver.
Yeah. Oh,
but
sure.
I think we talk about the consequences of those decisions. Yes. Probably wouldn't have ended out too well. So
100% it was out of protecting me. Yes. Yeah. Let's be very, very clear about that.
Yes. I was from West Jordan, went to Cottonwood, and all the rich kids from the east side were the ones with issues.
Go Skyline.
So they
and so here's the funny thing about that. He's right in West Jordan and Cottonwood, and all the rich kids were up on the bench. Yeah, I went to Skyline. I was in the rich school, if not a rich school, the rich school. But I was on one line. I was on 33rd South. I was on the wrong side of 33rd South. My dad was very lower middle class. So when I said I was from Skyline, people were like, oh, you must be this, that, and the other. I'm like, dude, have you seen my car? I'm driving a 79 Datsun. How do you think I'm rich? But at the same time, I had a girlfriend who was a girl. She showed up one day in school and she complained. She's like, oh man, I had to drive my dad's car here today. I was like, really? Why? She goes, well, my Miata can't go through snow. It snowed 4 inches. It just doesn't go because it's rear wheel drive. I was like, oh, well, that sucks. So what did your dad drive? She's, I had to drive his Mercedes. I'm like, you
poor thing. Yeah, you poor thing. I'm sorry. The rich.
Yeah, so your boy going to West Jordan and Cottonwood. Yeah, I get it. We trucked people in from West Jordan. I had a lot of friends from West Jordan. I love those guys. We had a lot of our Polynesian guys came in from West Jordan and South Jordan that they bust up to Skyline. I don't know if it maybe had something to do with our football program. I'm not going to say that.
Yeah, maybe there.
But Skyline was a good academic school too, so they got something out of it.
There have been allowances for those athletically gifted individuals to be in places. But anyway, all right. So
yes. We won't go into the oppression of LeBron James.
Yeah. So before we get too far away from it, all right. So to peel back the onion of moving from Compton to Salt Lake City, right? So it says all the Pac fam is my best friends. They just said that. All right. So we understand and we recognize and then this will help us kind of move the story forward in terms of race relations. We recognize that slavery, legally was ended in the late 1800s, but then you had the effects.
1860.
Then you had the effects of the new slavery, right? You had
Jim Crow time. Jim Crow laws, yes.
Yeah, absolutely. Before we even got to Jim Crow, you still had the prison pipeline where they would lock them in up. So with that being said, that takes us all the way from that's another 100 years, from 1860s to 1960s, where we were dealing with that.
Did we discuss that? The worst.
We haven't.
Okay, just to touch on it. The worst individual moment in the history of the United States, in my opinion, was when John Wilkes Booth put a bullet into Abraham Lincoln.
Absolutely, unequivocally. It changed the course of America forever.
For 100, we would be so much further along if that hadn't happened.
Absolutely. I believe that unequivocally. And then I think we'll get into that. But 1963 too. November 1963 also was a turning point in American history too.
Gee, who got killed then?
some guy from Boston, some guy. But so in terms of moving, right? We and this is where we get into. We're gonna have to have a conversation about integration too, because I have mixed views on integration and how that worked. Because I think, spoiler alert, I know I'm gonna get killed, but since I got the pen for Black America, I might as well say it. I don't think integration was in the best interest of Black Americans. And
say why though. I think you have a great point. Why?
I was just about to get into that. So
yeah,
it's not because I'm anti-integration. That couldn't be further from it. But what I do believe is it disintegrated the nuclear family in the African American community, and it also took away the independence of the African American family and made them more dependent. And then you look at the follow-on policies of taking the husband out of the house and paying the wife. It was more financially lucrative for the wife to not have a father in the house in the 70s.
The war on poverty.
Yeah,
you said about, but go back a little bit further, touch on a little bit more, because I think it's very, very important, especially from a Black perspective, of the idea of segregation, forced desegregation, having the unintended consequence of really destroying the reliance of Black Americans on other Black Americans and the socio-economic impact that occurred from it.
Absolutely. And then I'm glad you brought that up. So when you look back at that time, and then one of the greatest quotes that I hold dear to my heart is one of the last quotes from Martin Luther King was, he said, "I believe I led my people into a burning house." And by that he meant economically, right? So the war for civil rights, his whole mantra was like, hey, as long as we can get equal rights, everything will be fine. It'll be equal rights. It wasn't until late in his life till he realized that it wasn't the legal rights that he needed, it was the economic rights. Because at the end of the day, the power of money spoke louder than anything on the books written, right? So, but that's for another I guess.
But let's go back and let's look at Booker T. Washington versus W.B. Du Bois.
Those are those are my favorite.
Yes. So when you have, look at who was arguing for the economic impact.
Right.
Washington was. Right. He was saying, look, as Black people, we need to make ourselves so valuable to the white community that they won't want to get rid of us. We will be integrated through our own hard work, through our own intelligence, our own ability and skills. And I think, honestly, he was right. I think it's borne fruit that he was right, where W. Du was like, give us deserve.
Somebody said force integrate.
Much more eloquently than that, by the way. That was not making fun of W.E. Du Bois, by the way.
So somebody says force integrating begat development of gang activity, and where they decided they needed to group together in order to defend themselves. This was born the blood and Crip ideas and following the Panther Party of Malcolm X. The poor
especially against white police forces, I'm guessing.
Yeah. So man, listen. So there's so many things I want to touch on. So with Booker T and W.B. Du Bois, like I told you a while ago, it was one of my favorite debates, which I think remanifested itself with the Malcolm and Martin debates. Not physically, but
absolutely. I think the spirits were the same there.
Yeah, I think it was the same argument, just 100 years later, or not even, maybe 70, 80 years later. But all right, so Booker T. Washington.
It was also that Booker T. and Du Bois were arguing the economic side, where Malcolm X and Dr. King were arguing more the social side.
Social side,
yes, and that's unfortunately where it would have been very, very interesting to see the argument of economics between Dr. King and Malcolm X, because I think there might have been potentially some really significant ground there that they agreed on.
Surprisingly, they had a lot of synergy when it came to economic opportunity, right? So the cool thing about it, and that's the entire argument, and that's where I think Dr. Du Bois were wrong, right? I mean, he had a great idea. Hey, look, we're gonna take our best and our brightest, we're gonna put them forward, and we're gonna put them in positions of leadership to propel, on behalf of our community, to propel us forward, right? The fallacy in that is you're putting all your eggs into a very small basket. Whereas I think Booker T, with the nature of his conversation, was like, no, everybody's valuable. All work by your hands. You know what I'm saying? You will
bottom
have
up, top down.
You will have value based off of skill, and it's kind of the
Yeah.
same issue we have now, right?
Yep.
And 2023, you look at it. You got all these people, not just blacks, but all these underserved people with degrees, but they're underemployed. But you got all these guys in the service industry, the plumbers, the electricians. They're making $200,000-$300,000 a year, and and it's the same story. Just it's weird, and it's fascinating how history repeats itself in that manner.
I right now, I have a 14-year-old son.
Mhm.
I would, if he came to me right now and said, "Dad, you pick my career," I would say, "You're going to be a plumber."
Yeah, absolutely.
We're going to put you in as a plumber, get you out of high school. Let's get you with if there was a military plumbing, I'd say join the military, get your degree in plumbing.
Yeah.
Make them pay for it, get your licensing, all that. Go get with a master plumber, be an apprentice for 2 years while you're after high school, do trade school and be an apprentice for 2 years, get your license by the time you're 22. And you be that dude that is willing to get up any time of the day to go fix a leak. Because okay, KJ, when did your water heat? What time did you discover the water leak in your house?
Had to be maybe one afternoon, but it had been running all morning.
Okay, so now you need to turn the water off. You need to stop that, and you need a plumber to come in and fix it immediately. What were they charge you just to come look at the problem?
Oh, it was 175 emergency. That's just that's just for them to come out and look at it. But I mean, I knew enough to thankfully, but again, that's where that comes into hand at. And I think that hold on, somebody says Booker T was a red-blooded, blue-collar American. He is the example. Booker T is my dude, man. I really, I hate that you have to, even get in the conversation of having to choose one, because I think they were both extraordinary men. Even Marcus Garvey, who doesn't get half near as much credit. And I'll tell you why. But the reason why he doesn't get credit, because he was on he had a whole different mindset. He was like, yo, either you're gonna get down or we out. You know what I'm saying? Like, appreciate us for who we are, or we're gonna take our talents and we're gonna roll out.
No, you're not. I mean, but you could look, you can be brilliant and you can be wrong. There are people, I don't personally agree with this, but there are people who think Noam Chomsky is brilliant versus somebody like Thomas Sowell. I'm taking Sewell every day of the week, twice on Sunday, right?
I love,
right. But there are people, and so it's okay to say that if you had two philosophies between Booker T and Du Bois, that one was better than the other. Right. There's nothing against Du Bois, but I think that history has proven that when you're able to integrate into any society in a way that makes you valuable to that society, you will raise up your station in society. And I think Booker T was dead on. You want to go out and you be a bricklayer, go be a bricklayer and make yourself the best bricklayer, so that when somebody comes in and they want to build a house, they want to hire you. And it doesn't matter that you're black. It matters that you know how to lay brick. Where Booker T could say, hey, go in and best and brightest and all that. But you know what? Great, fine and dandy. But if you have people saying, we're not going to listen to Booker, or we're not going to listen to your best and brightest because they're black, that doesn't do you any good.
And that right there is the single most damning criticism of W.B. Du Bois's idea. He assumed once they ascertained a certain level of education, that people were going to see the degree instead of see their skin. And you can see that now. It's still the same thing. You can have, you can be a doctorate, but they're still going to look at you like, yo, who's this black guy? You know what I'm saying?
Well, KJ Brown just came onto the Supreme Court. She's the first black female on the court. But they're like, now there's a black voice on the Supreme Court. Time out.
Yeah.
There's now a black voice on the Supreme Court. I'm pretty sure there's been a black man on the Supreme Court for the last 40 years, almost 35 years. But Clarence Thomas not count as a black man? Well, he's not black enough.
The culture don't recognize Clarence Thomas, man.
So and that right there is why I say all of it's bullshit.
All of
the racist, all of it is bullshit, because if you're Clarence Thomas and you know the history of Clarence Thomas and you say Clarence Thomas is not a black man, then I don't want it. I'm not going to listen to you. You are so full of shit that you are not worth listening to if you for a moment say Clarence Thomas doesn't qualify as a black man.
No,
give me a freaking.
I ain't saying he ain't black.
I'm not saying you. You know what I mean?
I'm saying,
yeah.
I'm gonna put you on the game. So there's a saying in the culture that says all skin folk ain't kinfolk, and I'll explain that to you in a little bit. So
wait, say it again.
It says all skin folk ain't kinfolk, and I'll explain that to you in a minute. So
sure.
when Clarence Thomas was selected to replace Thurgood Marshall was staunchly against it, right? And everybody was like, yo, why are you against another black man taking your spot? Like, he's a black guy. And Thurgood Marshall was quoted as saying, listen, when we get to the point to where we're just putting people in just because of their skin color, we run afoul, right? And that leads into all skin folk and kinfolk, right? Even though...
But Supreme Court says, Brown, what you just said, she's your girl.
She is.
And she was only nominated because she's a black female. No offense. And here's the thing. The way it was done, you and I agree with this. The way it was done was asinine. Because if she's the best one and she's the one that you want, fine. I have zero problem with her being on the court. But when the president comes out and says, I will only consider black women or women of color for this, are you, time out.
And that was a huge red flag.
You just said you're going to disqualify 80% of the population based on, or 80% of the qualified, whatever, based on color of skin. How is that not racist? Now, because you take Johnny Brown, if she's the best, great.
Marginalize them at that point. If the president comes out and says, "Hey, I want this black woman because she's a black woman," they don't. Then no matter what her resume said, no matter what her
basically what he said, though.
That's exactly what he said. And that's why it was ridiculous. Why would you do that? Yeah. You know what I'm saying? This woman has been, served at the federal level for 20 years. She has a resume alone to qualify as a judge. Off the strength of her resume.
Yeah.
For you to come in and say, "Oh, I only picked her because she's black." Excuse my language, but who the hell are you to make that decision? We don't need that. Pick her.
You just now laid out the argument against every affirmative action that there is.
Right. And so here's the thing. Affirmative action was needed. And absolutely. It was absolutely needed for a time. But and that's one of the few things I do agree with Clarence Thomas on. Affirmative action was put in place to speed up the equality of society, right? To say, hey, look, we need these black faces in these places. Right.
Do you remember what he said, though?
What did he say?
Basically, he said, look, it's wrong, but I'm still voting for it because it's got to be done. It's unconstitutional. It's unconstitutional. It shouldn't be done, but it had to. Yeah. So he knew it.
He's like, I absolutely hate the idea.
But he's not black enough. I know it. I know it has to be done. I know the community needs it. It's constitutionally wrong, but go ahead because it's needed.
That was one of the few times where he saw the bigger picture, in my opinion.
It was one of the few times that he considered race in anything.
Exactly.
Which is supposed to happen. Right. Justice is supposed to be blind. Right. It's not. Race is never supposed to matter. That's why I love Clarence Thomas. That's why I love Alito. I love these guys who say this is what the Constitution says. That's all I'm going to base it on. That's what it says. When you have these other justices come in and say, well, what I think that it means is, well, maybe because if you look at it through this prism of the understanding of the pro doctris se tempo el blato blah, 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 then it means this. And it's like, no, shall not be infringed. That's what it says. Shall not be infringed. Well, that's not really militia. What is militia? Blah, blah, blah. No, shall not be infringed. It's not racist. It has nothing to do with race, and it's not going into the Second Amendment, but that's when it says that. That is my whole thing with the Constitution. Do you remember that movie with Joe Pesci where he was the homeless guy living up by Harvard? And so there's a movie where he's a homeless guy living up by Harvard. And anyway, so he gets befriended by a college student, and he starts he's in this class, and the professor is like, what is the brilliance of the Constitution? And, a couple of people raise their hands, and of course he sees the guy who's the bum. He's like, oh, please enlighten us, you're here, And he's like, Joe Pesci's voice, of course, like, and the Constitution, the great thing about the Constitution, sir, is that it can be changed. Our forefathers were so smart that they knew they didn't know everything. And that's what made it so smart. And he's absolutely right. It's a great speech. Yeah. But he's saying, like, the Constitution is not supposed to be changed on a whim. It's supposed to be changed when social winds are so strong that you cannot ignore them, nor should you. And when you talk about things like the civil rights movement, you talk about things like the prohibition was wrong, was fine. I don't have a problem with prohibition simply because they made it a constitutional amendment. Once it became a constitutional amendment, it is, and then it was rescinded because they were like, never mind.
We need
we don't want it. So when you talk about abortion, when you talk about race relations, when you talk about some of these things, you say, well, constitutionally, that's what it should be. It's like, okay, but it's not until it is.
Yeah.
And if you, KJ, want to convince me that there should be a constitutional amendment that says Black people should be treated differently based on their ancestries and receive a constitutionally guaranteed tax break for 10% for the first 20 years, blah, 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 whatever it is. I don't know how you would ever do it, but I'd say, oh, hey, you know what? If you got to pass it by the Constitution, fine. But until then, anything based on the color of your skin, to me, is racist and should never be done. It shouldn't.
I wouldn't want that in the Constitution anyway, because, again, that goes into my whole.
But what if it becomes unconstitutional because it's based on race?
Well,
I think it would be.
Yeah, it would be the same thing. But I don't. And then that kind of takes me into the whole plight of today's society, right? Like we used to be killers. We used to be individualists. We used to be able to we were hunters and gatherers. Now we're pacifists. The government put us in the zoo. They gave us checks, and we've been sitting on our ass for generations, right?
Are you saying we as a black culture, or are we saying we as in
in the lower middle class society, like
white trash and
absolutely,
and whatever the very bad word, the N word for yes,
and
because
so
that's the same word, but
and so
I know what you're saying.
What you've done is you've taken away the killer instinct, right? You've taken away the survivalist instinct. You've made them pacifists. You've made guys passive. That's why you have generations on welfare. And we kind of talked about this offline. I don't think we did a show on it.
Did I send you that video of the white woman who was a progressive from like the 80s, and the 90-year-old black man's like, I don't need you. I'm a man. I'm gonna go work. I don't need you.
I don't need your handout. I will go get it. All I need you to do is get the hell out the way. Don't stop me from working. Don't put up a barrier for me not to get it. Make all things equal and let me go get it on my own.
And it was this old black man who was like 90 years old. So like, and this white woman who's like, well, you don't understand what it means to be a black person in America. He's like, fuck you, bitch.
Yeah,
I don't know.
On her. Yeah. Who are you?
It was great.
Who are you to tell me that I have to eat for your man? I'm a grown man. I stand on my own feet. I worked my whole life. I can go get it on my own. And that, to me, there is no greater ideal. That's what makes this country great. You get the hell out my way. I'm gonna go get it. All I need you to do is not put up barriers to stop me from getting it.
Yeah, the laws that are stopping opportunity. Yes.
If I can get it, if I fail, I want to fail because I wasn't driven enough. I don't want to fail because the system stopped me from failing. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah. Quick question.
Yeah.
So, and I think I know your answer because we've talked about this. putting up the barriers. Welfare was an unintended barrier, correct?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Welfare destroyed the black community. It was another nail in the coffin of neutralizing the black community. First, you started with integration and you neutralized the black dollar, right? So before integration, the black dollar circulated in the black community 18 times before it left. 18 times. You say, well, why is that important? Well, when you look at
describe not everybody knows. Describe the black dollar.
So when we say the black dollar, you receive your paycheck, you work for let's say you work for it doesn't matter, the printing press, right? You receive that black newspaper pays you, your family, right? So that dollar starts with you. Now, oh, your kid gets sick, I'm gonna take him to, the black doctor that lives around the corner. I pay the black doctor. The black doctor says, okay, hey, the black doctor gets a call from the wife. Hey, go to the grocery store, pick up, some groceries and bring them home. So he goes to the black market that's right around the corner in the black neighborhood, and he pays for black groceries, right? The black grocery, then, and it just keeps going. So the black grocer goes to the black farmer, get the food, and it stays in the community, right?
18 times.
Why is that important? Well, when you look at societal sets now, in the Jewish community, 23 times a dollar circulates in that community before it comes out, right? In the Asian American community, 19 times before it comes out, right? In the white community, 17 times before it leaves their community. However, in the black community, the dollar is there only 3 times.
3
times. So you sit back and you look at it, you say, well, why are black communities struggling? Well, we're struggling because, one, we don't have anywhere to spend our money at. Because like I said, when the Chinese came in, they owned our grocery stores. They owned our supply stores. They owned all our needs. The black dollar accounts for trillions of dollars in the U.S. economy, right? The black dollar consumed black family, and I think they did a study on that in the 1960s. It was a really dope. I gotta find that video, but it talked about the black middle class dollar and how important it is to integrate their dollar into the U.S. economy, because their dollar is going to prop up the economy, because blacks are consumers. Mm-hmm. And even true 60 years later, we're still a consumer society, right? We
look
don't
at commercials. Look at how commercials today have many more black actors in commercials than they did even 10 years ago. There's a reason.
So what you do is you say, okay, well, we're going to give you this money on welfare, and then the money's gone, right? You go to one merchant and it's gone. It's out of the community.
Grocery store.
Yeah.
Drug dealer.
Yeah.
Or alcohol.
Yeah.
Beauty lottery.
And wherever you spend the money, because blacks don't own the businesses, the money's out of the community. Because that Chinese grocer, he's not gonna come, he's not gonna come back into the black community and buy anything. He's gonna go back home and buy something in his neighborhood, right? That white guy that owns the coffee shop, that owns that barista, he's not going to buy anything in the black community. When he clocks out, he's going back home and he's spending that money in his community. The black community is the only community in America that does not keep their money in. We are the lowest class. And then the crazy part about it is even the Hispanic communities, and they for whatever reason, they like to tie black and brown communities in. Even in Hispanic communities, the dollar circulates at least 10 times before it leaves the community.
And when it leaves the community, it's going back to Mexico.
Right. And and why is that important? Because the Mexicans, the Hispanics have cornered the service sector, right? When you need a plumber, when you need a woodworker, when you need a carpenter, you know what I'm saying? So,
wow, that sounds almost like something that Booker T. Washington.
That's what I'm saying. That's the whole premise of it. It all comes back full circle. Like, hey, man, make yourself indispensable.
He knew
indispensable through services, and that's crazy, man. We are now an hour and 30 minutes.
I think we're good. We're having a good one. I think we can keep going. So with that, here's one of the reasons I have an issue when we start talking about race and we start talking about opportunities, and we say things like, well, people join the military when they're black to they're only trying to escape their communities. So freaking what? Okay, so you're saying KJ Bradley you are trying to escape your not so great situation in southern Atlanta because there's no real jobs there. You don't have a lot of opportunity. You've never really lived outside of Cobb County or wherever, and so you're going to go join the military. Oh, well, you're just one of those black guys, just didn't have anything else going. So what? Even if that's the reason. And there's 2 ways to get out of bad situations for the most part in the black community. Well, 3 ways. College, which great. Of course we want that. The military and athletics.
Yeah, that's it.
White people, hey, look, I moved to Connecticut from Salt Lake because I wanted to. I mean, like realistically, I just up and went it. There was a girl that I was dating. I was like, hey, you live in Connecticut? I'd like to go out there and work at ESPN. Oh, her dad did something at ESPN, went out there. It never happened there, but I went out there and just got a job. But you don't see that in most of the American community, let alone the black community, where somebody, just goes, well, I've grown up. There's very much also the homebodies and the worry. I have soldiers. I have a soldier right now that they're just freaked out because they don't know what to do. They don't know where they're going. They don't know how they're supposed to do it. They're so lost. They're away from home. And they look at now on top of everything else, unfortunately, they look at everything through through these racial glasses and going, well, the drill sergeant hates me because I'm black. It's like, what has he said? Well, he tells everybody so he tells everybody to do this. Well, yeah. Well, when does he yell at you? When I'm doing the wrong thing? Then that's not racial, dude. Yeah. Has he ever yelled at you just, because you were the only person out of the whole group when you guys were, does he continually yell at you? Well, yeah. Really? Does he not yell at it? Well, yeah, he yells at other people, but and then once you start digging down, you go, okay, this isn't racial. This is you not knowing what the military is like, and that's fine. That's what you need to learn. But I do have these soldiers that don't know where they're going, what they're doing in life. They're so lost. They get worried. And then I've got one soldier right now. Oh, just this poor kid. I don't know if they're going to kick him out for depression or whatever, but this kid needs to stay in the Army to have any type of purpose. Because if they kick him out, he's going to go back home. He's going to be that kid that just, you couldn't even make it in the Army. What's wrong with you? And it's like, and the Army does a very, very bad job about keeping kids in. Yes, I understand we need to weed people out that don't belong in the Army, but belong in the Army. But at the same time, we're weeding kids out that I know for a fact a couple kids that black female, when I first get here to Port Gordon, really, really poor coping skills. Very, very poor. Anger issues. She'd been sexually used in basic training. So she wasn't assaulted or anything like that, but sexually used is a good phrase for it. So she gets down here. She's traumatized. She's pissed off at everybody. She goes to behavioral health. Behavioral health starts working with her. She's not getting what she expects because as a teenager, you expect certain things and you don't realize the Army doesn't go to your whim. And so the people she's going and talking to are like, oh, you're a problem. There's something wrong with you, instead of going, oh, you're an 18-year-old girl who's black female who's never really had any structure, any value. I sit down with her. I start talking to her. We get into coping mechanisms, into how she could deal with things, journaling, all this stuff, right? And they kick her out because she got a diagnosis, right? Diagnosed with something. From the time she was diagnosed to the time I met with her and worked with her was about 3-4 months, right? So in 3 or 4 months, here I am working with her, calming her down, teaching her how to do these things. She has a no kidding adult in her life who is showing her love and care and respect. And so I really think she understood. And then the Army goes, nope, because we diagnosed her with something. And the frustration is she'd gone to behavioral health for help with her issues that she was going through. And behavioral health, look, I love behavioral health. Anybody in the Army, please don't get mad at this. But behavioral health looks for behavioral health issues. They're looking for mental illness, right? Where a chaplain's not, where they're just to help anybody. And so they kicked her out. And I was like, you guys, we are struggling so badly at getting people in. And here's this girl who, and I went to the command. I was like, look, she should not be kicked out. And basically the response was, look, she's been diagnosed. This is now a medical thing. For us to stick our necks on the line means that they were told this by the powers that be above the commanders.
Wow.
If something happens to her in the next few years, this is now on you.
Wow.
If we keep her in. So are you willing to put your career on the line for this private? And of course, the answer is no, right?
Yeah.
Of course. Meanwhile, I look at it and go, well, wait a minute. What about these behavioral health people? Let's say she stays in for the next 3 years. Is their career done if she's in 3 years, she's a great soldier and doing great things for the Army? Of course not. They just go, oh, well, I guess she got better. Yep. Look how good I am. But you have this blowback and you've seen it in the military. You've seen this blowback of anything that goes against you, your leaders are racist.
Yep.
Anything that goes wrong, the system is racist.
Yep.
Well, I got it's a punishment in the military, Article 15, a non-judicial punishment. I get an Article 15 for this fight, and the white guy that I got in the fight with, he didn't get an Article 15. He got nothing. And then you start digging in and you find out, well, this is now your fourth fight. The guy you got in a fight with outranked you. Yep. You basically yelled at him, and then took a swing at him. He defended himself. Yep. But you getting the Article 15 was racist without realizing that, like, you at this point are lucky that you're legitimately staying in the Army. But yeah, it's racist. Now, does that mean that other racist things don't happen? The NCOs don't say stupid things like, hey, are you going to the DFAC for fried chicken and watermelon? Yes. Stuff like that happens. Absolutely came up in Kuwait. We were doing census session, brought up in Kuwait. My battalion commander, who's white, was like, excuse me? They said, what? He shut that shit down quick. Because after we met with the privates, then we were meeting with the NCOs and then the seniors. And he laid it out. He's like, any of you get a name dropped on something like that, you're done. I will not put up with that shit. I don't care if you're joking. That is not acceptable behavior, right? So does stuff like that happen? Look, you have on the other side, there's a black girl who she has these white braids, these blonde braids, and the Army regulation says that, hair color has to be natural color.
Yep.
Well, her blonde braids are natural for somebody.
Absolutely.
So she found a loophole in it.
Several of my soldiers later in my career was rocking that loophole.
Yeah.
I'm thinking to myself, like, man, but
if I go blonde, I'd be called out for an extreme hairstyle. Seriously, if I did full on Eminem, Slim Shady, they would tell me you cannot do that.
That would solidify your rock star status as a chaplain. I forgot. So we got to come and say, just like all the race farm community, teach your children and raise them the same way you were raised. I survived childhood and now I'm thriving in life. That's right, man. I think a lot of that goes back. The weirdness of it all is I think we can solve it simply just by having families. You know how weird that sounds? It sounds so simplistic, but when you look at everything, having and this isn't a case of homosexuality and all the other stuff. So alphabet soup community, don't come at me. I don't care what you do, but I believe in my family, man, woman, children, man, head, woman, submissive, and not submissive, not in a slave, but the man is the head, the woman is there to lead. Supportive. And then we raise our children together, right? That's what I believe. That's how I live my life. And, that's how we rock it in my family. So whatever works for you and yours works, but that's how we rock.
Now, I will say this. I will push back against subordinate. I look at my wife as we're absolutely equals. We have different.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, not boy, like not like
it sounded kind of bad, but but realistically, I think part of the racial issue And part of the problem that will never be solved is as long as we are unable to have these conversations and treat people in a way that we learn from those past mistakes. Now,
Yep.
my grandfather on my mom's side was from southern Georgia, okay, the hills of Georgia. So KJ has told me that if I have a direct story that uses the N word, to use the N word. KJ, please say that again.
Yep. Listen, man, the N word. So here's my take on the N word, right? I get it. But the words only have power, the power that you give to it, right?
Yes.
And I've been called a lot worse than the N word by a lot less people. So I'm not offended by the N word. It doesn't bother me because it doesn't hold any power over my life. And I get it that some people do, but this is our show and that's how we rock. So
yeah. And so I as KJ is the representative of the black he is the rep of the black. He has given me the card, the pass card to use the N word. Now listen, I'm not using this because I want to. It's to make the point that when you tell a story, you need to use the words that it's like singing lyrics. I think it's ridiculous to bring a rap star to bring somebody up on stage, somebody who's white, to sing along with them, and they go, "Oh, I can't believe you actually said the N word." It's like, dude, you said it in your music. I'm singing along with you. So my grandfather, being in the hills of Georgia, all black people were niggers. Mm-hmm. Now, so he was living in California, and pretty well off and doing well. And he was in my mom's house one day, and he said something about black people, and he said those niggers. And my mom said, "Dad, I love you. And if you ever say that word in my house again, you will not be invited back." And my mom said that was the last time he ever used that word.
Yep.
Now, fast forward 40, 50 years from there. And my first girlfriend, I was talking about her, this first girl I kissed and all this stuff. And I'm being real kind of sneaky about it. And my mom goes, "Lance, is she white?" And I said, "No." And she goes, "Oh, Lance, you could do so much better." I was a junior in high school. Mm-hmm. Yes, I was a junior before I kissed my first girl. Shut up. I can tell you right now, here, ironically, I was making tacos. She was black. I'm just saying a ethnic dish. But I remember I looked at my mom when she said this, and I said, "Mom, I cannot believe you just said that. That might be the worst thing I've ever heard you say." And she just shrunk.
Yeah.
Because she knew. Yeah. She knew. Like, now, look, if my kids want to date somebody who's black, as long as they're a good guy or a good girl, and they're respectful, and they come in and they are a good person, awesome. My 16-year-old, she brings her friends over. She's got some different girlfriends. Of her group right now, there's a guy she's kind of liking. He's a good kid. He's half Polynesian. One of the girls is what you could probably qualify as white. I'll say white trash. Maybe not. I don't know. But two black girls and a Indian girl. I would never once be like, "Well, Gracie, how come you don't have more white kids? How come there are more white people in your group?" I don't get it. And that's the point.
Yeah.
I liked living in Houston because right around the corner, my oldest was playing with two little girls, Rhythm and Lyric, who were black. I liked her being able to expand.
So Rhythm and
Lyric. Yep. When we moved to California, right down the street, one of the black family, I don't remember the mom's name, but the dad's name was Gary. And you know how some black parents, they put the mom and dad's name. Yep. The little girl's name was, I kid you not, it was DeGarion.
What?
DeGarion, yep. The other, and I don't remember the other kids' names, but they were no better than that. They all had Gary somewhere in there. I was like, God. Okay, cool. But again, to me, because now, would I have the same perception of the black community if I didn't have my best friend Eric in high school? Probably not.
Yeah.
Because when I was 8 years old, and I've told you this story, When I was 8 years old, we were, and I don't know if I said this before, it's probably in one of the other podcasts, but when we were 8, little man, I was playing with this other black kid, other black kid. Yeah. So I was playing with a black kid, and we were in the park, in the playground right behind my house was a park, and we were playing around, and I kept calling him a nigger. And I was 8 years old. This would have been, if I was 8, that was 1981. So Roots was on TV. It was probably something, this was not something that my mom and dad had ever used, but because it was on, my guess is, thinking back, it was probably because Roots was huge, right? And if you've seen Roots, I don't know, they might have used the N-word once or twice.
Maybe. It was Tarantino directed.
Yes. Hey, have you ever heard that, by the way, just real quick side note, Haley made the entire thing up? He wasn't related to anybody named Kunta Kinte. The entire thing was made up.
Yeah.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah, that's the secret in the black community for years. We knew that. But go ahead.
So we're playing, and I'm using this word, and this old man, probably in his 60s, 65, pulls us over. He says, "Boys, come here. I need to tell you something." He looks at me and says, "You should never use that word ever again. It is a bad word. It is an evil word. You should never say it." And then he turned to the young black man, 8-year-old kid, and he said, "And you should never let anyone call you that word ever again." Now, we walked away and we kept playing. But 8-year-old Lance, this is 42 years ago. I could take you back to the Canyon Park. I could show you the exact bench that he was sitting on. I grew up in that playground, but I could show you the exact bench where he was sitting. And it was such a thing for me that, like, as I've grown up, I have never called anybody the N-word ever in any anger, nothing.
Yeah.
I've said it a couple of times jokingly with my black friends in high school. I think I said it once to them when they were getting out of the car.
If you listening to NWA, you've said it plenty of times.
And so I'm just waiting for somebody to report this to my command and be like, "Your chaplain used the N-word." It's like, what was the context? This is not an EO complaint. Look at the context.
Please watch the show.
Please watch the context. And besides, KJ, as the black representative, has given me the card. But to me, that's where it all comes down to. It's not, there's two parts of this. And the first part, I think we all know, it's the second part that we miss. The white community needs to say black people are just black people. I mean, that's all it is. Get rid of African American. It's just American. I don't care. If it's easier to describe, I say, "Hey, I need private. Somebody go get me Private Smith," and say, "So which one?" I say the black kid. That shouldn't be an issue. There's no judgment there anymore. I say the redhead. Okay. Yeah. Now, if I go say, "Oh, that piece of shit black kid," that's a little bit different. Very different. But just as importantly, and this is where I think we're missing the second part of it. Just as importantly, we need to stop the black community from saying all these white devils are holding me down. This is all the fault of the white man. If it wasn't for the white community, if it wasn't for the whites, if white evil, you guys in the black community, I'm sorry, I'm going to speak to the black community right here. You need to look at the change in Malcolm X after he went to Mecca. The difference between what he said before he went to Mecca and he was buying into the Muslim Brotherhood racist, brutally segregationist doctrine versus afterwards, which was oh my gosh, we are all sons and daughters of God.
Yep.
And until the black community, the white community, I think, is actually much further down the path than the black community on this. I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, but I think we are.
No, I know some pretty racist black people. I ain't gonna lie.
The most blatantly racist things I've ever heard have all been from black people.
They say black people can't be racist, but I know some pretty racist black people. Like you be like, dude, like you be like, bro, like, chill. But I think
some of the military stuff.
I think one of the key things that kind of shaped and it's that interaction, right? If you being able to grow up with a black kid, right, and seeing that at the end of the day, he's just a kid. Shape
absolutely
your experience on race.
Absolutely.
Right? I think
Absolutely.
too often, because because of the impressions of each other, and the media has a lot to do with that, right, wrong,
Oh, yeah.
but because we don't interact as a society like we should, that causes a lot of unnecessary diversion and uneasiness when we do come together.
I want to push back on that. I want to push back on that just for a second, though, from what you said. I think that when we get together, whites and blacks get together, it's positive 99.5%
I was just about
of the time.
to say that.
And it's and then we keep laying. Two POGS Save America. We need to fix the frickin' media in this country.
God.
Because what you just said about the media pushing these stories is what does it. It's the media that pushes this anti-white, anti-black, anti-male, anti-female, anti-LGBT, anti. They are looking at it. I don't know what it is about the global media, and especially media in this country, that has led to this. And I think it has to do a lot with the leftist ideology of indoctrination and some of those things. But as long as we continue to have general mass media that propagates the ideas that whites and blacks are different, more different than we are the same, and that we are biologically different in anything other essentially than skin color. Because look, the greatest athletes in the world are black, except for the ones that are white. The smartest guys in the world are white, except for the ones that are Asian. The best looking guys in the world are black, except for me. Sorry, I was trying to go somewhere with that, but you know what I mean. So the best I should have gone with the best mustaches in the world. But ultimately, it's the media that says, KJ, you are black, Lance, you are white, and that is a problem.
Yeah, and I think that I truly believe, in all my experiences, it is by design. Because if the common American finds out, if the average citizen finds out,
oh no, you didn't freeze. Oh no, that's where you froze.
I have more in common.
Time out. You froze.
That is
you froze. You froze on.
Am I back yet?
You are now.
Am I back yet?
Yes, you are now. You started with, if the average American, and then it paused. So hit that point, and then we'll end it. We'll wrap up. Hit that point.
Cool. So what I was saying is, if there ever comes a time when the American realizes that we have more in common than we do ever against each other, that is when I believe the social elites of the world get scared. But as long as they're able to cause diversion and dissension in the lowest common denominator, they don't have anything to fear. And that's why the media is so powerful in keeping us apart. Because if we ever united and focused our goals to find out, well, all right, if you and I are saying the same thing, you love your family, I love my family. Wait a minute. So you don't do this, you don't do that? Oh, man. So what is really the problem? Then that's when we turn to our politicians. And I don't think they really want us in their business like that. That's just my own personal. I'll take my 10-4 hat off now and sit it on the table. But that's just
I'll tell you what. Maybe next week we need to do a full media one, because as we start going to this path, you guys, you see I'm an Army chaplain. Great. So obviously I have some pretty religious beliefs and all that. And you want to say, why does the world do this? And we might have to go down that path, because I think there are some I do think there are some literal evil forces at work that are doing this. And that might be maybe that's our next week, and put that as a teaser for next week, is talking about how does religion or lack of religion affect our abilities to solve these world problems. Because the whole point, to POGS Save the World, we're supposed to be coming up with ideas. So the solution right now, hey, tell your kids that the black kid around the corner just a kid. Go play with him. Or the
That's
white
it.
kid around the corner, just another kid.
That's the kid.
That's how stupid a solution is that? Have your kid play with other kids. That's the easiest solution. Arabs, go have your Arab kids, Muslim kids play with the Jewish kids. Go have your French kids play with the kids that take showers. You know, mix it up a little bit. Oh, I didn't get a laugh on that one. I didn't get a laugh.
No, you got. I was reading the comments.
Okay.
Morgan Freeman said the best way to destroy racism is to stop talking about it, meaning don't give it a stage. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
He said, yeah, Morgan Freeman's like, I'm not an African American, I'm an American.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So hey, take us out. Let's do something next week.
It, man. So next week, same bat time, same bat channel.
Ish.
Talking about
bat channel. Ish. Time ish.
Right? Ish. Hey man, this has been 2 Pogs. I'm your boy KJ Bradley with the world's greatest chaplain, Lance O'Neill. We'll see you guys next week, man. We out.
Out.